Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with my friend Paul Glover, the No BS workplace performance coach. He and I have recorded an episode in the past, but this time's a little different. We're both pretty fired up about changing the perception of 2020 as the worst year in our professional career. There's a window of opportunity for reflection and rebuilding in our organizations, and we want to see them turn into stronger, more engaged environments. As you'll hear, Paul is so passionate about this opportunity that he's hosting his first ever webinar on January 26th. If you haven't had the opportunity to hear Paul speak, you definitely should. He is the definition of dynamic. You may not love everything he has to say, but I can guarantee you this: there will be no BS. Enjoy. All right. Hey, Paul, great to see you again. Thanks again for coming back to Distribution Talk.
Excellent. Hey, Jason, thank you for allowing me to. I had such a good time last time. I enjoy our dialogue together, so it certainly is a privilege and a pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. Well, been reading a little bit on LinkedIn, been reading your post. You have got a daily message I'm seeing. That is not always easy to keep up with, my friend, but you've been throwing out nuggets of wisdom along the way.
Well, thank you for reading them. Obviously, as I tell people, I really don't pay attention to who does. I'm glad to hear you do. My obligation is just to keep putting it out there.
Great. The big thing that you and I came together on, at least on this episode, was that you had a really important message around 2020. I mean, and you're actually going to record it. So this is crazy. It's not just something you're going to throw out there and say. You're actually going to put some recording around it. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about why do you feel so passionate about, looking at 2020?
Well, obviously, everybody is happy to see 2020 in the rearview mirror. But after having lived it and taking some time to reflect, as I tell people, I'm calling bullshit on considering 2020 as a throwaway year. Yeah. I don't believe it was wasted. I truly believe that there were lessons to be learned if we're paying attention. Mm-hmm. And what I found is that because most people are focused on the bad things that happened, the hard things that happened, that they've forgotten what those lessons are. And clearly moving into 2021, they need to reflect on what those lessons are. And the reason why, obviously, is I'm looking at 2021 as a copy of 2020 without the big surprise.
Yep.
But I also see that there's a level of optimism and hope based on the vaccine, of course, being distributed, that is starting to impact how people are feeling about the next normal.
Yeah.
And I think that the next normal has got to be structured based on the lessons that 2020 showed us, because 2020 revealed the flaws. They revealed the flaws in the system, the process, and the people. And if we don't learn about those flaws, they're going to continue on as a part of the new normal, because I know, I've been doing this way too long, just like you have, that as soon as we think we're safe, we're going to want to return to the old comfort zone.
Yeah.
We're going to snap back. And my theory is that status quo kills the future.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, to not allow that to happen requires us to look at the lessons when it comes to product, process, and people, see what the flaws are, and correct the flaws. We've got that period of time right now because it's still a period of disruption. Mm-hmm. We're not done with this yet. The COVID is not under control, but we see it coming. But this is I truly believe this is a once-in-generation opportunity for leaders to structure a new normal that is so much better than the old normal and not allow the snapback. And that's why, as I talk to my clients, I emphasize that. And the more I talk to them, the more I said, wait a minute. I really want to see if I can't spread that message beyond my clientele. So I started working on a webinar, my first one.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, it's been a pain in the ass. And I'm a slow learner, but I'm struggling and I'm doing it.
Good.
But this one to me is a passion presentation. And so that's why.
Paul, as you were talking about, this maybe the attitude prior to 2020, you start to see things get kind of fat and lazy and a little sloppy. And this reminds me of how we were in 2008, and maybe even a little 2009, is that, we were just so fat and happy. And I know from looking at the clients I worked with, and I know in my business, we were all just going along, getting along, and things were just they were just too loose, and there was too much money in the market and too much money out there that we didn't have to tighten up. We didn't have to, look at those processes. We didn't have to look at people, and we just kind of rode the wave. And then all of a sudden, bam, just got slapped upside the head in 2010. And it took a year or two, but I think honestly, there was the snapback. We fell back into the complacency again because money got good again. And we've ridden the wave now up, and then all of a sudden, and 2020 comes and slap, we get hit again.
Yep.
And I'm hoping, I agree with you. I hope that this is going to be hard enough, because I don't think that earlier one was, even though it was for some, this one was hard enough that I hope that people remember, they remember, what happened.
And unfortunately, we have short memories. And maybe that's how we survive. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe so.
I tell people, if a woman has a second child, it truly tells me she's got a short memory. Oh my God, we're the same way. And by the way, we in the times of good, we develop really bad habits as an organization.
Yeah.
We allow the working dead in. We do bad hires. We do Theory X leadership. It just works its way into the system. And by the way, we accept it. We're like, well, it's not that bad. When I talk about getting rid of one of the working dead, the first thing somebody says is, well, they're not that bad. Wait a minute. Once you said the word bad, I don't need to hear anything.
Everything else is erroneous. Yeah, we don't need any of this other stuff. It's bad.
Yeah, let's start with that. So, of course, what 2020 did was it broke that system. Some of my clients reduced their staff by up to 60%, especially in March when they thought that it was really going to be bad. So once that happened, then my discussion went to, as the business started to build back and some stability came into play, it was about, all right, are you actually going to be cautious about who you hire back? Or are you just going to take that body that you need to fill? And so, and by the way, they were more willing to say, well, we'll hire back slowly, go through the process. But I guarantee you, once things get good, you said it, it's already happened before in 2008 and 9, people will once again get sloppy, revert back to bad habits. So that can't happen. There is no way that a progressive company should allow that to happen, especially when it comes to the workforce.
Right.
Everybody thinks they've got perfect processes. Well, let me tell you, 2020 showed flaws in everybody's process.
Sure.
And the reality is that those flaws have got to be corrected, because you can't keep sticking good people into bad processes and believe that it's going to be okay.
Right.
You either burn them out or you don't get the performance. And so as I look at that, that's required. Who should you go to talk about the flaw in the process? The people who work in the process. Mm-hmm. So we immediately moved to the employee group from my perspective, and they need to be included. And we've not been good at that. We've not been good at including the guy or the woman at the front line in the process. This is the opportunity to say, we're not going to allow that to happen anymore. So the reality is there are several elements that need to be brought to play. And the first is to examine, again, process and people, make sure the right people are there, processes are corrected. But then you go beyond that. The concept of sustainable engagement is intriguing to me. Mm-hmm. Think about this. I'm sorry, you've obviously tripped my trigger.
Oh, God, I got you, didn't I?
Gallup continues to do these surveys that says we have 35% engagement. Let's all applaud. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? This is not a good thing. Right. What the hell? So guess what? It's time to look at sustainable engagement so that you suddenly get a larger percentage. And also, Gallup has found out that 85% of the workforce does not work to potential. If the holy grail is engagement, and we keep saying it is, every leader says, if I can just get them more engaged, let's not just look at engagement, let's look at sustainable engagement. And that means you start to engage the employees in the process, and also decision making. The one thing that happened with most of my clients is decision making had to be done so fast just to not sink at the very beginning and panic that it was pushed down to the front line, and they were told, you do anything you have to do to make this business survive.
Mm-hmm.
You know what they did?
Yeah, they stepped up to the plate. Oh, I saw it time and time again. I would agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how about if we make this a part of how we do things when times are good? Rather than just have the owner of the company decide on a fluke by the way, I'm a Chicago Bears fan. And when of course, my heart is broken every year.
I'm sorry, man.
Yeah. And
it was like being a Cleveland Browns fan, but then actually they're looking all right, man.
This year you're good.
This year they are.
I think about how they hired Matt Trubinsky. It was not a team decision. It was on a fluke by a guy that was in charge. It does not work well anymore. Let's get, all of us are smarter than one of us. I don't care who you are. So how about if we actually structure inclusion in decision-making as a part of our next normal, our new normal? So anyway, you've got me just babbling here, but the reality is I look at the opportunity as a window of opportunity. And by the way, it will shut.
Yeah. The
window for change will shut like all windows do. And if we haven't changed it, if we haven't changed the comfort zone, it reverts back to the way it was. And by the way, everybody wants pre-COVID comfort zone, and no employer should permit it.
Right. Paul, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up that window of opportunity for change. And in fact, it's kind of ironic. I literally just wrote an article about this. I was sharing with you, I had a discussion with my partner about what did we observe from 2020. And one of the things was around that change, that when we're trying to implement something, we're trying to make changes in the organization, there's always going to be those folks who are fearful and they're very highly resistant, the ones who will dig their heels in the sand. And they just make it miserable, frankly, for us to try to do anything a little bit different. Well, what was fascinating, and this is something that my partner had shared, that the groups that he was facilitating were saying that some of these really die-hard resistors all of a sudden weren't as bad. They started to have this little inkling that change was okay because, they were forced to.
Yeah.
And I think that, speaking about your window, I've really been thinking about this. We've had this forced change in our society. We look back and we say, okay, when we go into grocery stores, you have to wear a mask, or you go into anywhere, you got to wear a mask, or we can't eat indoors anywhere, or all of these other restrictions that if you look back, honestly, if we look back in 2019, none of us would even believe our behavioral change. We'd look at each other and go, who are those people? There's no way. And so there was this forced change, this absolute push of a forced change. And so because there's that forced change, I think that has spilled over to those people in our companies that have always been resistant to change. And now they're just a wee bit more pliable than they have been in the past. And that's the opportunity I think you're talking about.
And you're absolutely correct, Jason. There's no question about that. It's up to the leaders now to take that window of opportunity with even the resistors and implement programs that absolutely make a difference. The concept of well-being, I'm not sure. By the way, I understand lip service and we give so much of it, but the reality is that this matters now and everybody recognizes it matters. And if you want an engaged or sustainably engaged workforce, you better pay attention to this. Yeah. Because your talent is, and also consumers are looking at this. We have a different perspective of essential workers now. Right. I think more respect. Yes. And they need to be treated better. And the concept of, I love work from home, and I love people that hate work from home. I'm not the person working from home, by the way. Yeah. It's the guy who owns the office building wants the seat filled because he needs to see you work.
Right.
Yeah, let's get over that. All right. Let's look at results and outcome and not hours. How about that as a change? And I understand how difficult that is, but we need to start thinking about that. Trying to force people back to the office for no reason other than I don't trust you to be at home.
Yep.
And that's how it feels to me. I mean, I understand that there's this
I would
thing
agree.
going around. Let's have socialization. I find that interesting because, and by the way, with that socialization, we're going to have innovation. I have never heard a boss come out and ask for innovation.
Yeah.
And if you want to start including your employees in the innovative practice, I'm okay with that. I just haven't seen it. And I find the studies about productivity when you're in the office to be astonishing. The studies show that out of an 8-hour day, you have 2.5 hours of productivity. That's because the home office is where good ideas go to die.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a horrible statistic. Horrible.
It is, but it's absolutely accurate. And
Yeah.
let's get our head around the fact that things don't have to be that way. I look at, like I said, too many elements here, but I got a couple more that really impacted me. I have no idea why you can't get your pay when you need it. I don't understand why we have a 2-week payroll period when we apparently have the IT capacity to put people on Mars. How about if we just make it available? How about once a week? So that the essential worker who has to go get a interim loan because there's an unexpected bill could get his pay when he needs it once a week. Is that such a terrible, it just makes no sense to me, and yet we don't.
Yeah, I know tons of people that pay once a week, and it's just, you're right. I think there are some norms that have been in place for way too long.
Yeah.
That you're right. That is really, especially that one. I mean, that is not serving that person. You're not engaging because you're not listening to the needs. You're listening to your own needs, not their needs. Well, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more that we've entered into this opportunity to change some of the norms that we've seen inside these companies.
And why? And you said the magic word. How about if you actually listen to your employees,
right,
ask them what they need, and structure a work environment that meets that? And by the way, I'm not an idiot. I want every company to make a profit. I want every company owner to make money. I'm not asking you to do that weird thing that would shut your company down. But let's look at what you get in return. If you, in fact, are flexible and adaptable and meet the needs of your employees, what you will get is sustainable engagement that will increase performance and profitability. It's such a simple formula.
It's interesting, Paul. I'm thinking about a lot of this leadership. I don't know if they know how to ask those questions. And I had, again, a good friend who has been on the podcast a couple of times. She's a researcher. She does surveys, does customer experience engagement. But one of the things she's been doing a lot of is creating surveys and creating feedback mechanisms for employees, talking about, how their experience has been through this COVID period, including work from home and those types of things, because leadership doesn't know how to ask those questions.
Right.
Yeah. And when they do, often the employees don't trust that they can give an honest answer without getting their head chopped off. They're looking at it. There's too much bias in the process. I think there's just way too much bias. And so, maybe some of these leaders do need to engage that third party, that unbiased third party, or people like you and I who can try to ask those questions and keep it relatively safe.
Absolutely. And by the way, there's this myth of psychological safety that keeps being perpetuated. It is nothing but a myth. I'm sorry. And you cannot expect somebody to be honest with their boss. It just doesn't work. Can it happen?
I so agree with you. Yeah.
There's somebody out there, but not the norm. That's why when I do 360-degree reviews, I do them. And why? Because people are, or a focus group, and I'm sure you've had the same experience.
Yeah.
I'll sit out with a focus group, and I'm a complete stranger. The only thing I tell them is it is anonymous, and they will open up about issues that they have never expressed with their leadership. And you're absolutely correct. And by the way, I'll one tale. I had a boss that had a third shift. Companies have third shifts, right?
Yeah.
So as I went through the coaching process, I said, so when do you talk to the third shift? He said, I never talk to the third shift. I said, what are you talking about? Are they a different company? It's not your company, right? He said, no, of course they're my company. I said, then you need to go talk. He says, well, they don't start until midnight. I was like, Your guys are actually, your people are there, go. So he did. And I told him before he went, I said, look, when you go into the plant and set up, go to the lunchroom, tell the supervisors, get the hell out and sit down. Now, the first time you do this, they're going to call the police because they have no idea who you are. So I said, so introduce yourself.
Right.
Right. Now, right. You do it once, that's cool. The third time you do it is when they'll start talking to you. If you're not willing to go through that exercise, don't bother. But let me tell you, the third shift matters. That's where bad things happen.
Yep.
So the same thing now, we've got the opportunity and we keep saying we want to listen. And I love the idea that they've got somebody out there who's giving them a script. At least it's a start. Because you know as well as I do, Jason, that every level of promotion that a leader gets takes them further away from the truth of the front line.
Yeah. You know, Paul, it's interesting during your, when you were telling about that third shift, the first thing that came to mind was Herb Kelleher, from Southwest.
Yes.
He would show up at like 2:00 in the morning and go talk to the mechanics, talk to these folks and talk about what's going on with the planes. And that made an impact. That was one of the things that made a huge impact on me is that, he was one of those people that didn't mind waking up in the middle of the night. Maybe he just had to, but he got to see what the real questions were and the real challenges were. If you are relying on reports or middle management to tell you, what's going on, you're going to miss it.
You are. They're going to tell you what, by the way, they don't believe in psychological safety either. They're going to tell you the good stuff and you're going to find out the bad stuff when it happens.
Yeah.
But Herb Kelleher is a great example because you're right. He would get up and go talk to people. And by the way, like I said, after you do it 3 or 4, don't start and then stop, by the way. So if you're not going to do it, don't try. But if you are going to do it, it will be valuable information. And now is the time. Now is the time to say, I'm going to start a new practice of listening.
Yeah.
And we talk, I know it's difficult because I'm a terrible listener. I always want to talk. But the reality is that listening gives you insights you're not going to get. And hearing it from the frontline person without the filters of their supervisor and their manager and their exec gives you insights that helps you change your business for the better. And that's what you need right now.
Yeah, it really does. And again, I think that since things are still, so uneven and topsy-turvy and there's nothing set in concrete right now, why not start now?
Absolutely. It is.
Why not do it now?
It's there. Yeah. The chaos is yours to take advantage of. The title of my webinar is The COVID Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Go make it an opportunity to improve the organization. And by the way, if you wait till 2022 to apply the lessons, I'm sorry. The window of opportunity will have closed and the status quo will reassert itself because the status quo is strong.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're
right. It is too strong
now, but it is strong. And once the pressure is off, we will revert back. So no, and that's going to be the webinar for those people who are interested.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And we'll definitely link this and we'll definitely give a shout out to, make sure that people know where to go. And it's coming up quick. It's coming up the 26th. But as you mentioned, you're going to record it. It's going to be on demand. But boy, it'd be nice to have some people in the audience, the first round.
Well, and obviously, look, the dialogue with you does nothing but stimulate me to be more passionate and to think of something I would not have thought of. And so that's the kind of interaction that I know you enjoy. Obviously, you wouldn't be doing a podcast if you didn't, but I'd love for my first webinar to have that level of interaction that cranks me up.
Yep.
And by the way, I'm looking for somebody who says, are you full of bullshit or what?
Right,
I can't believe you think that's going to work because at that point, we actually will be listening to each other's opinion. And by the way, it's always interesting. I'm a recovering trial lawyer.
Right.
And the whole concept of argument is not to berate the other person, but it's actually to find out what their position is so that you can then have a conversation about it. We've forgotten what that means. We think that arguing is screaming at each other. It's not. It's listening to the other side.
I think also it helps us solidify our position. It's very introspective. As you are in the middle, you better start thinking about why you really believe this, or else you're going to get rolled and dusted. I mean, you're going down.
You're absolutely right. That's why it should be challenging. Those dialogues should be challenging, stimulating, informative. All of the things that I hope I'm going to be if anybody shows up.
And I hope they do. Paul, it's interesting as we look back, you mentioned this earlier, people like to dwell on what was negative around 2020. And I got to stop for a moment and say, there was a lot of things actually that worked out pretty well in my favor, at least, and that's not belittling anyone in their struggles. But I have to admit that there were some really great things that happened, at least to me, in 2020. And if you wouldn't mind, what worked for you in 2020? What was something you walked away and felt really pretty good about?
Well, I tell people I've been socially distancing for the last 30 years, so it wasn't an issue. But what I did do was it gave me time to actually reflect. We get so caught up in the day-to-day activities that we often don't take the time necessary to reflect. And I feel that the reflection period that was given, especially my coaching style, changed dramatically. I bill myself as the no BS workplace performance coach.
Right.
And that was cool until March. And in March, my clientele did not want me to talk to them about working harder. They didn't want to hear performance improvement. And I said, well, okay, that message is not going to work. I need to have a different message. And the message became well-being.
Okay.
First, I want to know about your self-care.
Yeah.
And I don't want to hear that you're entitled to put on pandemic pounds. I don't want to hear that. What I want to hear
is COVID-19. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. If you're a team leader, your team is now more dependent than ever on you. And that means you have to eat better. You have to sleep better. You have to take care of yourself, self-care. And then we would talk about the team and how you had to address each, because suddenly they're not in front of you, right? So what did I learn? I learned that I actually, as much as my wife would debate this, I actually have a softer side that I try not to show. It absolutely gave me experience that allows me to now have a different conversation depending on the situation. I also got my second book halfway written.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and I obviously felt that 2020 was a terrible year, no question. We've been restricted from seeing people, our grandchildren in particular. I get all that. I have a compromised son, but you deal with that. And my wife and I adapted a different rhythm.
Yeah.
And it was not a bad rhythm. Not that I don't want to see things get better, but so it was a mental change in how I looked at doing what I do for a living and also what I wanted to do. So moving forward, I'm trying to apply those lessons.
It's really interesting that you say that.
Wait a minute. How about you? You don't get.
Oh, my turn. Okay, all right. I can't get off the hook. Okay. It's really interesting. I thought a lot about this. Because I was a traveler. I was on planes. During my season every other week. And I was constantly. And I've been doing this now 17 years. And this year I haven't. I mean, I honestly have not been on a plane since last March. And it's been a really interesting experience. In fact, in reflecting on it, I got to spend a lot of time with my family. And for some, that might not be the greatest thing, but I really reconnected with my family and it was nice, and that was something that I realized was very important to me. And I didn't give it as much credence before. So that was something that, I've taken away from 2020, that I had this opportunity to spend more time with my children, more time with my wife. And it was that's important to me, and realizing that.
My wife and I had the same experience. She was furloughed from her job for 2 months. Mm-hmm. So for the first time, maybe ever, we spent an extensive amount of my work time together. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was illuminating for her. But at the end of the 2 months, they called her back to work. And I said, well, you were thinking about retiring. Maybe you should this would be the time, right? And she said, after spending 2 months quarantined with you, I intend to work till I die.
Exactly.
Okay, honey.
All right, honey. Thanks for the pat on the back. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And Paul, though, the other things I found is that I was a lot more adaptable than I thought. And I could really move a lot of what I do to the digital format. And as I shared with you before, I'm starting a new business, another business with a partner, creating facilitation groups and doing things like that. And that's really been something that's going to, I hope, become a very positive outcome of what we engaged in 2020. So, I think I look back and it doesn't have to be all negative. I mean, there are a lot of shining things that can come out of it if you choose to. And that's a lot of the message that you're bringing out, is that it is a terrible thing to waste. If you're going to look back and just, you know, cry in your soup about what happened, rather than taking those whatever you got out of 2020 and moving forward with it, then you missed. It's just a miss. And you might as well just throw away 2021 as well.
Oh, absolutely. Because if you think until obviously the vaccination gives us herd immunity,
Right.
things aren't going to be 2019. In fact, I don't believe that they ever will be, but regardless, they are going to be different. And you're right. You need to, and I hope that if people come to the webinar, that's a part of the deal, is to say, I want you to stop and think about 2020 in with a different
Yeah.
perspective. That's all. And if you don't find any opportunities, I don't think you're looking hard enough, because you look at a team that probably showed more resilience and more adaptability, just like you, than you ever thought possible.
Right.
And instead of just accepting that as, well, so what? How about if we build on that by saying, you've shown me that you have the ability to do more, to be more. And I'm going to reward that and help them grow. I mean, when you think about the concept of resilience, which we keep talking about, this was the test.
Yeah.
This was the test for every member of every team, every leader of every team. Are you resilient enough to survive the worst disaster in your professional life ever?
Yeah.
And by the way, I know some guys that just froze in place.
Oh, sure.
And I understand that, right? It was a terrible thing. But at the same time, those that didn't absolutely should be proud of themselves and should reflect upon what that hidden potential is suddenly not hidden now.
Right.
If you didn't think you could do it, look at what you did. Now let's turn around and use that newfound strength, that newfound self-confidence to generate a different place.
Yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we looked back, and it doesn't have to be this year, but maybe even down the line, a couple of years, and said, wow, 2020 was that turning point for me. That was the point, or the catalyst for me becoming what I am today. And I think that would be pretty remarkable, to say, wow, I've got a different view of what that was. And that was the turning point.
Yes, and I see no reason why that won't happen if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
But we have such a tendency, I want to rush to the future where it's going to be better because I'm now vaccinated and I don't have to wear a mask. Okay, right. I get it, but you can't leave that experience behind, or you can't benefit from the experience. Bring it with you. I don't care whether you like it or not. It's a part of who you are now.
Right.
Bring it with you and treat it with respect. You don't have to like it, but you have to respect it because it occurred. You survived it. Let's take a look at how that happened and what growth opportunities are there. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I absolutely agree. Well, hey, I think I've, talked your ear off a bit here, and we've told a couple stories, but again, really excited about this first webinar for you. I mean, I think this is really going to hit home. This is something that people need to hear. So definitely, is it going to be on your website?
Sure. The website is paulglovercoaching.com. Not too original, but definitely descriptive.
It tells it like it is.
I can be reached at paul@paulglovercoaching.com.
Okay. So, we'll make sure. I'll make sure I link all of that stuff.
I appreciate that.
And again, it's the 26th. We want to make sure that it's January 26th. And those of you who have maybe listened to this in the future, you can always come back and listen to the recording of Paul's webinar. And it's not as cool as the live thing, but you can always get a hold of him, and I guarantee he will talk to you about what happened in that webinar. So
you can guarantee, you're right, and I will. So yeah. best.
I know you
Jason,
will.
as always, I love being on. It stimulates me to talk to you. You're a bright guy because we think alike.
Yeah, absolutely. Just makes it easier. It just does. Well, my friend, thanks so much for taking the time to come on and share this message with everybody.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz of the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by Connected Peers Organization. CPO is a new organization dedicated to providing fast-paced monthly networking opportunities for industry peers. To learn more about how CPO can bring solutions to your role, visit us on the web at www.connectedpeers.com.